Hello and welcome back. So let's deal with the invite here. So since we've already invited this user, it's supposed to show us that this user is already invited. So, but before we do that, there's one issue that I noticed which I need us to change. So let me log out as the admin of this page and log in as somebody who's just a member. So I will add my password there. Okay. Where is this? All right, so let's go to that group. And when I click on members, I don't actually see. It says you don't have access to this content. And that's because of a small mistake in my code. So open up the group content members page and remove the S there. It should just be member as the access level. So save that, and now if I refresh, I do see the members there. And this this div here is going, these divs are not aligned, and that's because the number of lines here is different to the number of lines there. So here there's 1 2 3 4, here there's 1 2 3. So when you use display inline block, this is one of the things you may see. So we can change that here because we are getting user group member dot include. So let's go there, click dot include, and then right here where there's display inline block, let's also add vertical align, and let's use top like that. So vertical align top, that way when there's a problem they'll align with the top like that. Okay, so great. Now let's log out and log in as our main group creator user. Okay, so let's go back to groups and let's go to my group and click invite, and we already invited the only user here. If I click again, you see that we are brought back here, but the record is in the database. So we just need to be notified that this user has been invited. So it's easy to check who has been invited here by, let's go to group invites. And this is the record we have here. So we only need to get the user ID to check if it is there, and then the disabled is equal to 0, and then the group ID is correct. So we have to check for these three things. The inviter in this case is irrelevant. Once we find that record, then we have to mark it. So we go to our functions so that we create a new function. Okay, so let me come down here at the very end. So there's group access here, but we can create another function. Let me just duplicate this. Yeah, so now let's create a new function, say is invited or something, is underscore invited. So it's a question like, are you invited or not? So what do we need? We need the group ID, of course. We need the user ID whom we're asking if they're invited. We need to check the group ID and what else? So group ID, user ID, and disabled. So we don't need to supply anything for disabled, so I will remove that. So we just need the group ID and user ID. Let's begin with group ID here. Put this at the beginning and move this to the other side. Okay, great. Now all we need to do is run a query and figure out if that query is correct, and then we are good to go. So here I will let me copy this part right here. This looks fine, and let me paste it there. Okay, like this. So db query excuse me there. So we will need the new database here like that. Okay, so there we go. So only thing we need is a query here, but let's sanitize our data a little bit. Group ID is equal to int group ID. We cast it as such, and let's change the user ID as well here. Okay, like this. Now we're going to say select user ID, because we don't really want any data from here. We just want to know if there's a record, because as long as there's a record there, then we know the person has been invited. So group invites, that's the table, group invite, where group ID is equal to group ID and user ID is equal to user ID, and the rest of this does not matter. Bam. Okay, but let's begin with let's add one more here. We'll say and disabled is equal to 0. Okay, just like that. So we return true or false, is invited. So all I need to do now is go back to my group member include, where is this? User group member include. Okay, this is the one right here. Wait a minute. This one is on the invite page. So let me see what we're actually doing on the invite page. So I'll go to group content invite, and it says user invite. So this wasn't very good naming. I should have followed this user group member, user group request. It should have been user group invite. So maybe actually we can rename it real quick here, just so we can keep it's always good to have things well organized. And let me come back here, group requests. Where is that? Okay, so we'll go up here and invite. So let's change that to group underscore invite. Okay, so refresh. We haven't changed anything, but now if I click on it, user group invite, then right here where it shows this invite, I can put an if statement. Okay, so I will say, first of all, my PHP tags, of course. I'll say if is invited, like this. And then let's add, okay, we need the group ID here and then the user ID. So the user ID is inside friend row there. Copy. I'll put a comma there and add it. Put a full colon, close the tag. But now I need this variable here, which is the group ID. So any hint of group ID here? I think there's group data, which comes from the main body. So I'm going to just say group data and then user ID, like so. Okay, so that does it. Now let me close this. And if, like that. So that now if he's invited, we don't see that that button there. So instead we can add an else statement here, so that we say else okay. So if there's an else, we're just going to put this in quotes and say invited, like that. Refresh. Okay, invited. So this does it here. So John Captain invited, so that way we cannot invite them twice. It won't really do anything even if we invite them twice, but at least we should know that the invitation actually worked. So let me delete this record here inside group invite so that we can test it again. Refresh. refresh, and it's still giving me that. So group invites, where is that? Let me make sure there is no record. Okay, so there is none. But if I refresh now, it's still saying invited. So there is definitely an error here. So if is invited will bring a true, so it's bringing out false, which is else, and then it comes here. Okay, so let me come back here to the same functions here so that we can check on the function and see where it has a problem. So it's showing that the whole thing is false, even though we can actually find a user with all this here. So what we will do is what I'm going to do is echo out the query. Now, once I echo out the query, I can go and test it inside my SQL tab. So refresh, and here it is. It says select user ID from group invites, where group ID is equal to. So now the thing here is I'm getting group ID is exactly the same as user ID. So right there, that's a red flag, which shows me that there's something wrong here. So let me just take a look for a second. So group ID is a different variable, user ID is a different variable, same as here, group ID, user ID. So let's go to the other side where we are sending this information from. So say, where is this? Group content invite. Is this the one? Okay, there it is. This is where we're sending the information from. So group data, user ID, user ID. Wait a minute. Yeah, this is indeed a group. And then there's friend row, user ID. Okay, so here we have to know which of these two has the wrong data. So already here I have group data, user ID, same thing that's happening here if the invite button actually worked. Okay, so for a second here I will mute my if statement so that I can see the button properly, and then hover on it, and on the side I can see that the two links are different. The two items in the link, this one and this one, are different, and this one here, friend row, I'm fighting with my mouse here. So if they are different like this, it means even here they should be different, and yet they are the same. So that is not something is going on here. So let me come back to my functions. It means this is where I have made a mistake, maybe. Oh, I see where I've made a mistake. Sorry about that. The mistake is here where I customize integers like this. So let me remove that. Instead, let me use add slashes. That was my mistake. Now, the reason that caused a problem is because integer has a limit, and that number we saw here is the limit of integer. So let me refresh now. Yeah, so now we have different versions of this. Okay, which is good now. So I can remove the echo, save, and refresh. Okay, so if I refresh now, there's nothing here, so it shouldn't say invited still. So now that we have a proper query, I just need to know why it's going through the, it's not going through the true, it's going through the false because it didn't find the record. Okay, so it returns false. If it finds it, it returns true. So this means that we have inverted our, where is this, user group invite.php. So we have inverted this. So we're asking the question, is invited true or false? So if they are invited, we are not supposed to see this button here, but we are supposed to go to here. So if is invited, so instead let me put a not question mark at the top there just to invert the result. So refresh. There we go. Now let's invite him and see if it's going to react accordingly. So click there, and there we go. We see an invited thingy there, showing that we have indeed invited this user. So if we had many users here, some of them will have invited, others would not have it. So which is correct as we need it. Okay. So now what we need is a notification to the other user so they can come back and actually accept or decline the invitation.